a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com. Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Your hosts, Joseph and Michelle Whalen, a husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics, are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom.
Welcome to Insights into Entertainment. This is episode 147, Disney Dissected. I am your host, Joseph Whalen, and my patient and understanding co-host, Michelle Whalen.
Hi, everyone.
So what makes you patient and understanding for this episode, dear?
I don't know. I'm kind of confused.
It's because you were patient and understanding with me when I was down in Disney.
Oh, okay. I thought that's what it was, but I wasn't completely sure. I didn't divorce you while we were away,
that is true. And welcome back to the show, by the way. You did take a couple of episodes off while Sam sort of stepped in for the topics he wanted to do.
Yep.
So this is your first time back in the studio recording for almost 2 months now, isn't it?
I can't even remember because I did an Insights into Tomorrow episode.
Right. You stepped in for him.
We kind of filled, and then we were trying to find other topics to talk about to give Sam some more time doing the entertainment stuff, and me, and it just never. There wasn't anything that,
nothing jumping out.
Yeah, nothing jumping out. So.
But he kind of took to the entertainment side, so he may come in and fill in for you more often. We'll see.
There you go.
Today we are talking about dissecting Disney, and this is really about our trip to Disney.
Right.
So as previously promised on this podcast, this week we bring you our review of the current state of Disney parks in Florida. Having spent a week down in somewhat sunny, often rainy, and oppressively hot Florida, we've had a chance to see if Disney has been able to bring the magic back. We'll take a look at the resort we stayed at, the amenities offered, and the service at the resort. And then we'll take a look at some of the technology that Disney's trying to throw at its guests to justify the drawbacks of a lack of service in some parts, but a cost as well, as they pretend to give you more services.
Right.
And finally, we'll talk about our experiences at 3 of the 4 parks, because we don't really go to Animal Kingdom because it kind of sucks. But
other people enjoy that park.
Other people do enjoy it. We don't.
We don't. It's not one of our favorites.
Not. And it's not an all-day park for us, even if we do go.
Right.
And we'll talk about where those parks stand compared to our previous visits. Before we do that, though, I do want to invite our listening and viewing audience to subscribe to the podcast. You can find audio versions of this podcast listed as Insights into Entertainment. You can also find audio and video versions of all the network's podcasts listed as Insights into Things, and we're available any place you can get a podcast these days. I would also invite you to Write in, give us your feedback, tell us how we're doing, give us your show suggestions, what you want us to talk about. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. We're on Twitter at insights_things, or you can visit us on our official website at www.insightsintothings.com for all of our social media links. Are we ready?
Sure.
Let's go. So the resort. So this was our first time back since COVID hit. It's been over 2 years since we've been back. Tried to take it kind of light. We didn't go overboard on this time. We actually did sell our DVC in the interim since our last time down.
Correct.
So we weren't staying at a DVC resort. We stayed at All Star Movies.
Correct.
So what was your first impression of the resort itself?
Overall, I really didn't notice much of a difference. One of the things that they've been pushing even before COVID started was getting you to do online check-in in advance of your reservation so that you didn't have to go to the front desk for check-in. And again, like I said, that's been something that was going on before COVID even happened, because we would normally do that, where we would check in a couple of weeks beforehand, and then usually once we got down to the area, we would get a text message saying our room was ready, and we could just go to our room because we already had Magic Band, so there was no need to go to get a key or anything like that. So that was still in place. So again, we didn't go to the front desk. Basically, the only thing that we checked in with was security. Once we first got there, showing our ID, they basically, yep, you're here. And, we kind of went on our merry little way. And probably within, 20 minutes of us getting to the physical resort, we got a text message that our room was ready, but we had gone to the main building to go get lunch. And kind of walk around a little bit before we actually made our way. So again, nothing really seemed that different from the last time. Of course, it's been probably 3 or 4 years maybe since we've been at an All-Stars or a value resort, because again, we were using our DVC for most of the trip. So again, I didn't notice anything major, different in it. Obviously, and we'll talk about it, that the rooms have obviously been updated since the last time we had stayed at a value resort.
Yeah, and that's really the biggest thing I think that I noticed about the resort was they pulled out all the carpeting. Because it was always themed rooms. It was always some kind of, print carpet on there that was relevant to the building that you're in or whatever.
Right.
We happened to be staying in Dalmatians while we were there. But they pulled it out. You had all hardwood floors. You had all brand new furniture.
Correct.
You had really what was an innovative approach to furniture where you had a convertible bed.
Right. You had sort of a Murphy bed. Yeah. That when the Murphy bed was up, it was actually a table.
Right.
So and it was so funny because I think the first time we went to convert it, we were like, what do we do? Like there were no instructions when all you really had to do was just pull it down. So you just had to make sure that the table was cleared off.
What was nice about it was the use of space was much better than it had been with two beds in there.
Yes.
The problem is that when we come in, me specifically, I come in with a load of technology. And what I'll do is I'll set up on the table and leave it there for the duration. And unfortunately, we didn't have that option here because the table went away at night because we had to use the bed.
Right. So I could totally see if it was something where you were maybe only, 2 people in a room and you didn't need to have that second bed all the time, that you could, easily leave everything. But I could see for anybody that had 3 or more people, you would always have to transform your room or just leave your bed down, but then you didn't have the table. Space. So that would have been a nice thing if they had something where they had like a flip down table attached to the
To the
wall.
Yeah, like an IKEA style table.
Right, where you could just flip it down and this way put the chairs, because you still had two chairs.
Right, you had to do something with the chairs from the table.
And that was what was so funny, was like seeing other rooms, what people did with their chairs. Now, the other thing too that we had was you rented a scooter from an outside company, so we had it in our room. So that kind of ate up some of the room in some of the surface room of the hotel room. So a lot of people would put their chairs against the window. There was actually one that actually just put them outside.
Yeah.
I guess they needed, that much more room. So it was kind of, you didn't know what to do with the chairs once the bed was down. Like there was no specific, area. It was basically, okay, well, we'll put it over here for today.
So they upgraded the bathroom area as well.
Yes.
So traditionally what you had was you have a small bathroom that has a shower and a toilet, and then your sink is outside in sort of like a little prep area.
Right.
And that, for privacy in that area, you typically have a curtain that goes
Well, it was
across.
funny because I remember years ago they didn't have the curtain.
Right, you had nothing there originally.
So that this way, if somebody was brushing their teeth, it was out in the open, but where the bathtub and shower and the toilet are, there was always a door.
Right.
And then at some point they added a curtain so that this way, if you wanted to get changed and, they evolved.
So that's been evolved into a barn door style sliding door.
Right.
For additional privacy. But what really struck me was they replaced the door, the swing door on hinges in the bathroom area, with a telescoping door.
Right.
That slid in behind the wall itself, which I thought was a brilliant use of space. Like that's one thing that they really did, was when they redid the rooms, they did things to maximize that space. Like over where your cooler, because you don't have a refrigerator anymore, where the cooler is, there's a piece of furniture that's kind of like a little breakfast nook type thing.
Right.
So
because they had a coffee maker, like a single-use coffee maker there. They had your ice bucket there, and then there was a drawer
for all drink accessories.
Had like the coffees and the teas and everything to go with the coffee. And that area you could kind of use as a bar, your beverage keeping, snack area.
Like a beverage cart, basically.
Yeah.
So the room was okay. There were a few issues with it. The one thing we noticed when we got in there was the lock plate on the door was loose and eventually fell off.
Right.
The room phone did not work.
And that we only found out because we went to call the front desk one time and went.
So we couldn't call the front desk from the phone. We tried to use the app, and we'll get into the app a little bit later, but we tried to use the app, and that didn't work either.
Right.
So you happened to find one of the maid service, and they were able to call
housekeeping, and they got a hold of somebody.
We had multiple issues with plumbing there, where they had to come and snake the toilet. And it wasn't just us. There were 3 other instances where I saw them walking around with the snake.
Oh, wow. So it was other people. Okay. So
it was an issue with the hotel itself.
Okay.
What else do we have? Drainage. Oh, my goodness. It rained, and you had literally swampland if you were walking around the outside.
And that's something just in general with Disney, you can find on TikTok and YouTube other people posting videos from the park.
Sure.
But
I've never had that experience. And all the resorts that we've been there before.
I don't think we've ever noticed.
Because someone would be out there taking care of it.
True.
They may have had drainage issues
in the past, but we just never noticed it.
Guests.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah.
And the one area by the parking lot that had the big drainage issue, they had one of the grounds crew come through on one of their little John Deeres and track mud all over the sidewalk in the process of doing that.
Right,
And no one cleaned that up. And it's starting to look a little run down and tired. There were a couple of areas there. They were basically fire hydrant areas that weren't maintained. They were rusted. The paint was coming off.
Okay.
So it was very un-Disney like. Disney is always, even at the discount resorts like that, they've always kept up with it. And it just seems like it's kind of run down. The first day we got there, one of the 2 elevators was offline. It took them most of the day to get that one fixed.
Well, they were actually cleaning they were cleaning the I don't know what you call it, on the top where they had like plastic panels covering the lights, because when we had gotten up to our room or down, I don't remember, I ended up seeing the maintenance, and they were basically just cleaning. So there wasn't anything wrong with the elevator. They were actually just cleaning it.
I see.
So,
and then really the only other big complaint I had about the resort was you had someone out there for the better part of a day who was pressure washing one of the staircases at the end of the building.
Right.
And just the fumes, because it was an internal combustion engine compressor they were using. You were gagging as soon as you walked out of your room. Now, granted, it was hot, it was humid, the air wasn't good to begin with.
Right. It might not have been a good day to do that.
Yeah, I mean, have a little, wait for people to at least leave and go to the parks, because this was like, first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
They're doing this type of stuff. So, room service. So where we normally don't do room service, we'll put our do not disturb sign out there. They used to do daily room service.
Correct.
And now they're down to every other day, every 3 days
or something. And I think it's every 4 days if you're DVC.
Yeah. And to me, that's a significant drop in service, because they didn't reduce the cost of the room at all.
Right.
In fact, it went up. And you're getting less service there. So that was a ding, I think, in my book. Paying for parking. Still one of my biggest pet peeves that I have there.
Right. And again, going back to that whole, hey, we didn't check in, there was nothing ever said in anything.
Right.
Like, hey, by the way, because for the most part, this was actually one of the first times that we didn't charge things back to the room. One, because we had done a whole gift card thing, so that was a good portion of our charges, and then we just charged it on to our various credit cards, because in most cases, if you were using a Disney credit card and your bill was a certain amount, you would actually get 10% off, whereas if you were charging it back to the room, you weren't going to get that discount. So it wasn't until the end of our stay when we actually got our portfolio, and I was like, oh, what were all these charges? And opened it up, and it was parking. That was literally all it was. And that's where, again, we've been there since they've been charging for parking, so it wasn't a shock for us. But what if this was our first time and we didn't know? That's something, granted, yes, it's not the security officer's job checking you in, but if you're doing the mobile check-in, if you're checking in, online beforehand, something should pop up saying, hey, by the way, just so you know, if you're driving, you're going to have this $15 a day or whatever.
How did they know that we were driving is what I'd like to know.
Well, because we checked in with security, that was what.
So that could have been a rental car we had for one day and got rid of it, or we could have been getting dropped off by someone. How do they know that you're parking there?
Well, and then that's the thing, is that we would have had to.
I would dispute that charge because it was never detailed anywhere on the original bill.
And that's the other thing too, because what used to happen is when you would go to the front desk and check in, they would ask you, "Oh, are you, staying on property?" Because they would give you a parking permit. Right. So now they don't even print out.
And they'd get your license plate number.
Right. But they got my license plate number when we checked in, because security there was a camera towards the back that could see my tag.
So they're nickel and diming you there, which was very annoying.
Right.
We bought the mugs, which I didn't want to do, but you thought it'd be a good idea to buy the mugs.
Right.
And the quality of mugs have gone down significantly. They've got the cheapest lids. The lids kept falling off. I almost lost the lid twice. It's just, I was very disappointed at that, but that's there to support the fact that you can't get multiple refills. You buy a disposable cup from them, you pay $4 for it, and you're allowed 3 refills within an hour or two or something like that, which is idiotic. It really is.
Right.
Because Disney is not losing money on me getting a refill on my soda.
And granted, you almost never got a refill on your soda.
Right. So, and the problem that I have,
but the fact that they
You're charging me
that.
$4 for a soda, where 90% of the cost of that drink is the cup.
Just the cup, yeah.
And you're putting a chip in that cup now, so I can't get refills, which makes the cup more expensive. It's an idiotic business model that they have there. I didn't want to go on with any other complaints about the resorts. Did you have any highlights, any positives, anything nice to say to counter any of my complaints?
Well, the one thing I did like, which was new, I think, since the last time we were there, is that they actually have, when you go to the buses, if you're taking the resort transportation, because usually most of the time, if we didn't have the scooter already, we would usually just drive to the park. This way we wouldn't have to worry about waiting for a bus or anything else. But because of the scooter, we had to use the transportation. And one of the nice things was, as soon as you got to the area, they had a little schedule showing you when the next bus, estimated time when the next bus for the different locations was going to be coming. So that I thought was very helpful.
And they've had that at the moderate and the higher end resorts.
Right.
This was new for us
at the Value Resort.
Value
so it was
Resort.
that was
nice.
a nice touch to see. So
all right. So we'll give them a plus for that one then. Let's take a quick break and we'll come back and we'll talk about some of the technology that Disney is throwing at some of these issues. We'll be right back. For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com. Welcome back to Insights into Entertainment. Today we are dissecting Disney. So one of the things that Disney has done to try to enhance the experience is go the technology route. And that technology route is apps on your smartphone at this point in time, and bands and all that stuff. So right now, the Disney World app that they have with their nice little 50th anniversary logo on there is the central part of that technology push. You pretty much need it for anything you want to do: booking rides, checking times, getting into your room, pretending to call the front office because it doesn't work for that.
Your photo pass.
Yeah.
Reservations.
I have to say that I was very unimpressed with the app. I found it to be poorly designed. Someone looked like someone gave a 5-year-old a box of crowns and asked him to design an interface. It was confusing. It was not obvious or intuitive to use. Finding the information that I wanted just to go in and look up times or to look up available slots for reservations for different extra services like building a lightsaber or a droid, you couldn't find that stuff. And the whole thing was predicated upon this whole idea of build your experience. And in order to do that, you pick the things you want, and that's all that you saw. If you ever wanted to stop outside of that, you had to go back through the entire wizard and reset all your settings in there to see anything. And I thought it was a terrible experience. Right down to the point that you bought one of the new Magic Band Pluses. And what happened with that? Tell us what happened with that.
So I wasn't going to buy the new Magic Band. But the last day we were in a park happened to be the Magic Kingdom. And at Magic Kingdom, they had a Haunted Mansion one. So of course, me being the Haunted Mansion person that I am, all right, fine, I'll get it, just to have it, whatever. and we charge it while we were in Hall of Presidents. You had already bought one and you had no issues getting it to sync up. Everything was fine. I go to sync it up and I get an error. And I try and go through again, and then it tells me that the app has a bug and to uninstall and reinstall the app to try and fix it. I do that, doesn't work. I try taking, because there's a QR code, so first I try linking it by the wireless link. That didn't work. Then I tried taking a picture of the QR code to do it that way. That doesn't work. Then I even tried entering the code manually.
Which is a challenge considering how small those numbers are.
Right. Entering the code, nothing. As soon as I would do it, it would fail and again tell me that I had a bug. So by that point, I was just fed up, and after spending almost $50 on it, I went back to the store to return it. And of course, the cast member there was like, oh, well, if you do decide to, purchase another one, we do have tech support people, located throughout the park that would be, willing to help you. And by that point, it was already our last day. Maybe if it was our first day in the park and I had, the whole rest of the week to worry about it. But this was literally our last day.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm done.
It wasn't the band itself. It was the app.
Right.
So that's really where I think the biggest complaint was, because there was a lot of things with that app. The calling the front office.
Well, when our phone calling the front
work,
desk.
We tried to call the front desk. You can get to it through the app if you could find it, because it wasn't easy to find.
Right. And that was another thing, another challenge of things weren't where you thought they would be.
Right.
If you did a search, it would eventually find it, but it was like I shouldn't have to be searching every time.
It was almost like they did no user testing of this.
And then that was the whole thing too, because when we were having the issues with the bathroom, I was like, all right, well, let me just call the front desk. And I'm like, and I couldn't even Google a phone number for the front desk either. And then the one day I actually just walked up to the front desk and they were like, oh, well, you could have just done it on your app. I'm like, no, I couldn't. And she didn't believe me.
Right.
And she walked me through it and was like, oh, okay, that is a problem. Yeah. No shit. I know it's a problem. I'm pretty tech savvy. I understand not everybody is tech savvy and you have to talk to, every guest like we're an idiot, but it really wasn't there. And then, so you can't even say, oh, well, it's because you had an Android, because you even had the same problem and you have an Apple phone. Right. So it clearly wasn't user error.
No,
it's something with your app.
It was app specific.
Right.
So some of the other things I found were an issue was you could look up wait times for rides. Mm-hmm. They weren't accurate. When you guys were going around and doing things, I was riding around the scooter looking at wait times on the app.
Okay.
Oh my God, they were 15 minutes off, 20 minutes off.
So they weren't updating
They
as
were
often.
not done in real time on the app itself, which makes the app useless at that point when it comes to that function.
Right, because especially if that's what you're determining, oh, well, this wait's only, or this wait's 60 minutes, but yet the wait might only be 15 minutes if you actually went there, but then you don't want to go there because...
The entire purpose of the Genie experience is you don't need a fast pass because we can tell you when these times trend here, and it's completely wrong. I lost my Magic Band at one point in time because it was on a little holder on my original one. So we kind of panicked a little bit there. We were able to get the ticket to get into the park, but I didn't have a way to get into the room. Right. So I was able to use the app for that, and it worked. But it was awkward. It's like 4 screens in, you don't know where on the phone it's transmitting so I'm moving the phone all around the thing to try to get the thing to work. Right. It scans the first time and it goes green, but it won't unlock. Well, there's a prompt on the screen that you don't get an audible prompt on, where you have to accept the ability to unlock the door at that point.
Yeah, see, I never tried doing it that way. So
it was not good. And the other problem is they don't have any free charging stations that you can use around the park.
Right.
If you want to pay for them,
right. I was going to say they have the charging rods that I know. And that was something that we knew going in from various other people who had been there and various other YouTube videos and things that said, if you're going to be on your phone a whole lot more. Make sure you have some sort of battery backup so that you can charge your phone. And honestly, there was only, for me, there was one day that I had to charge my phone, but I really didn't even need to. But that was also because we really weren't using the phone as much.
Well, and we'll talk about that in a second, too.
Yeah.
And the last big complaint that I have about the app is they have this device where they're tracking the vast majority of people because you're dependent on it to use the park.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not using the data. We wind up outside waiting for a bus. It took us almost an hour to get a bus when the entire line was full waiting for buses. How are you not using this? You're tracking these people.
Right.
And you're tracking them for the purpose of taking a picture and tying it to their account.
Mm-hmm.
How are you not using that information to dispatch buses?
Right.
Or crowd control for different rides? Like, I don't understand why you would have all this information and then not use it for a constructive purpose.
Mm-hmm.
They're using it to try to sell you stuff. And that's all they're using it for. And that's a huge insult to the guests.
No, I agree. Especially when it comes to the end of the night where everybody is tired, everybody is cranky.
Yep.
Why you would have all these empty buses. Now, granted, maybe you didn't have enough bus drivers, but maybe that's what you need to plan, is that you always know at the end of the night you're going to have a rush of people wanting to get out. Why not put that extra
and in the past, they've had instances where you've had cast members at the bus stops.
Mm-hmm.
And the cast members are calling in the dispatch saying, I need a bus for this resort. I need a bus for this resort.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have that.
Right.
And they didn't need it because they have the technology. They just chose not to use the technology.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that massive scam that is Genie Plus.
Oh, Genie Plus.
So tell us how much we paid for that and how much we used it.
So we paid $15 per person per day that we were in a park on a regular park ticket. So we only went to the park for 3 days, but the one day was the Halloween party. And because of it being a special ticket event, you don't use Genie Plus on that day. So we only had to pay for Genie Plus for 2 of the days that we were in the park. So $45, so $90 total for the 2 days for the 3 of us, because each individual person has to have it for however many days. And since we hadn't used it before, we figured, you know what? Let's try it. Let's give it a try and see if it makes a difference or helps us out.
We took one for the team so we could review it for the podcast.
Right. And granted, there are lots of pros and cons. You know, there were a couple of friends of mine who had used it before, and they said, oh, it takes a couple of days to get used to it. I'm like, well, I only have 2 days to get used to it. So I either need it to work or not work. And the big push before used to be, you know, buying it ahead of time and making sure you had it, even though you couldn't really do anything with it until the day of. And now there's some other changes that they're making to it. And again, I'm not really 100% sure of what they all are because we're not there anymore. So I'm not really paying attention as to what those changes are. But I know one of the major changes was that you didn't have to purchase it until that day if you wanted to get it. So
doesn't make
again,
it worthwhile.
Right. So
how many rides did we get on using that system?
Okay. So in Epcot, which was our first day, we did the Remy ride with it. We did it with that, or was that with the virtual queue? No, the only thing that the virtual queue you could do with the virtual queue was the Guardians of the Galaxy, and that we didn't get. And that I woke up at
So we got
6:45. So because they had a 7 o'clock and a 1 o'clock for the virtual queue, and I got up at 6:45 to try and get a 7 o'clock, and by 7 o'clock,
well, we already knew the virtual queues were broken.
right? So that was
So we got one ride in Epcot.
well, we technically had 2 because we ended up getting Soarin', and then you didn't want to go on Soarin', so we canceled it, and we ended up doing the single rider, which we didn't know was available.
Well, that's another thing I want to talk about, but when we get to the
Sure.
parks.
So we did have one, but then since you decided not to go on the ride and they had that available, we used that in place of it. So we had gotten rid of that, and then that was when we made the Remy reservation, because the other thing too is when you make the reservation on the Genie Plus now, you can only have one at a time.
Right.
And then once the time frame starts for that reservation or that lightning lane, that's when you can make an additional lightning lane through your Genie Plus.
All right. So we paid $15. We paid $30.
$45.
$45 because I didn't go on Remy, so I'm not counting myself for that. So for $30, you went on one ride in Epcot
Mm-hmm.
for $30.
Mhm.
And how much did we pay for park tickets?
More than $30.
$1.20 maybe?
I think it was about that. I don't remember
So
what.
$30 for one ride.
Mm-hmm.
Then we did Studios. How many rides did we get on with Genie Plus with that?
We did. Maddie and I did Toy Story Mania with it. We did Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Coaster with that. What else did we do? We didn't need it for... No, we did use it for Smuggler's Run.
For the second run through.
For the second run, because again, we did the
solo rider.
The solo rider. So we got 3. Did we get a 4th one? I think we only got 3.
Okay.
So we got 3 with that.
So that's now $60 for 4 rides.
Mm-hmm.
Was it worth it?
Probably not.
This is $60 on top of $120 per person per ticket to get in to ride the rides anyway.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So we're talking about $150 per person for Genie Plus and a ticket. And Genie Plus got you 4 rides. That to me is a scam.
Mm.
The other thing that I found was interesting is we got into Magic Kingdom early on Friday because of the party.
Right.
And it was still regular admission in there.
Mm-hmm.
We walked past Peter Pan.
Right.
And the Lightning Lane. And the Lightning Lane was easily a 20-minute wait at Peter Pan.
Mm-hmm.
What's the purpose of the Lightning Lane if it's a 20-minute wait?
Right.
This is the problem that I have.
Well, when the regular ride is a 60-minute wait, a 20-minute wait is nothing. But again,
Still,
yes, we know.
That's not Lightning. I'm sorry.
Right. I understand that.
Lightning is I walk in and should be able to get right on the ride.
Right.
Especially when I'm paying for it.
Right.
What rides were not eligible for Genie Plus?
I don't know if there was anything
Besides Guardians of the Galaxy.
Well, Guardians of the Galaxy, because that was the virtual queue.
Right. So you could only do virtual. Was Rise of the Resistance one you had to pay to get on, or was that eligible with Lightning Plus?
I think it might have been, because I think what they do with their certain big ticket rides, you know, kind of their e-ticket rides, is they offer the additional pay for me
Right.
Lightning Lane, and there's so many of those that they put out, and then there's so many regular lightning lanes, and
so here's where the real scam is.
Oh, yeah.
So pay $15 for Genie Plus, unless you want to go on this other ride, and then pay another $15 to get on that ride.
Right. And it's not always $15 because depending
They change the
on
rates based on on
the time of year. So it could be $20 to go.
Okay.
But all the ones that we saw where they were an additional fee. So like the Guardians of the Galaxy, we didn't get the virtual queue. But now they didn't. So with that, it was only virtual queue or paid Lightning Lane. There was no standby, meaning you couldn't just go and wait for 2 hours on a line to get on the ride.
Thank God for that.
Right. So it was either you got in the virtual queue for free, or you paid $15 to get a time spot.
Comparing the scam of Genie Plus to FastPass.
Oh my God, there's no comparison between.
Okay. I think that ends the argument on that one then.
Right. There was, I personally didn't. Now, if we had done a full Magic Kingdom day, I could see Magic Kingdom.
Well, the problem I have with that is you can only reserve one at a time.
Right. And
you have a 1 hour cooldown after you've either canceled it or used it.
I don't think we did.
In the app you do.
Because I was actually able, because the one
might not have been on canceling, but
I don't know, because there was one that I had one reservation and I actually had the next one and it was actually overlapping because the one was from like 1 to 2 and the next one was from like 1:30 to 2:30 and I was actually surprised that it.
Well, then they may have changed that.
Or it could have been a fluke.
I had a work colleague that was down there 2 months ago and said that was one of the problems they ran into.
So maybe that was something that.
So let's move on from Genie Plus because if I stay on that, my blood pressure is going to go up. Real quick, before we go to break, Magic Band Plus.
Okay.
Is it worth the price? It was about $50 with tax.
I wouldn't have done it.
How do you feel about the fact that you need to charge the thing? It takes 90 minutes to charge. When you first buy it, you got to charge it.
You know what? I already have my watch that needs to charge, so that was kind of a... Oh, okay.
Well, and that's the other thing. It's a proprietary charger.
Right, and that was the thing that you said was, oh, great. So now if I lose this charger, I'm never going to be able to charge my Magic Band again.
But they sell extra chargers
But they do
now.
sell extra chargers for you.
But God forbid you give me a device that can charge on an Apple charger or an Android charger or a standard Qi charger.
Right. And the other thing, too, was, yeah, it's cute that you walk past, so they have the different statues and stuff, and if you wave your band in front of it, sometimes the statue,
if you walk past it, or if you look at it wrong, you have no idea how to trigger these things.
Right, because there's nothing that I found. I'm sure probably somebody has put together a YouTube video saying, oh, here are the different things that your Magic Band will do. And the thing is, they've been doing things like this for years. Back when they had the 100th anniversary, the 100-year anniversary or the 100th birthday for Walt Disney, they had these special pins that you could get.
Right.
And when you would go on certain rides, the pins would light up. Or if you were watching the fireworks, they'd light up. So this is kind of the same thing.
They're vinyl. They're like the old ones were. So they're very sweaty. They're very hot to wear.
Right.
Mine fell off 3 times.
Right.
After having put it on. I had to have you carry it because I was afraid I was going to lose it.
Right.
What else did I have down here?
That it didn't have any sound.
No sound. So, like, the thing would vibrate and the thing would light up, but, like, you have no idea why.
Right, because when we were walking out of Magic Kingdom, we didn't walk past anything special that I knew, and all of a sudden I'm like, why is the band...
Right.
I already have enough things on my watch to notify me of different things. I didn't need it.
It's almost like, hey, this is really cool technology, let's sell it. And nobody was like, what are we going to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
What's the purpose of it? Oh, just sell it. We'll figure it out later.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when the Magic Bands came out, they had a true purpose.
Right. And I could see if we were annual pass holders or we were still DVC and we'd be going down a couple of times a year. All right, sure, I'll get the new band, because that's the other thing too, is that no longer as a resort guest do you get a free Magic Band, because that was what they kind of moved away from, the room keys.
Right. The crack dealers at Disney gave you the first dose, and now you got to pay for the rest.
Well, fortunately, we have enough Magic Bands. We don't need we don't need to buy a $50 one. So
All right, so the technology to me seems more like a scam than anything else, and it's a money grab. I think we can kind of agree on that to a large extent.
Sure, we'll go with that.
All right, let's take our last break, and we'll come back and we'll chop up the park experience. We'll be right back.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
All right, we're back bitching about Disney parks. Here we go.
It's going to be such a great podcast.
So we've got 3 to complain about, and I'll start off with Epcot. So we're still at the point where we have to make a reservation to get in the park.
Correct.
One would think the reason for that was to regulate how many people were in the park, you would think, right?
You would think.
Still packed and crowded as hell. Don't understand that. Got to make a reservation, but I got people crawling all over me still. Someone needs to explain that one. Huge sections of the park are shut down because of the construction that's happening, which isn't unusual for Disney. The problem is it requires you to completely reroute how you get from point A to point B.
Correct.
In a park that has literally the longest walk between rides already. So it's forcing you to extend those rides where they probably could have been a little more strategic in how they set those barriers up. And the fact that you have to order ahead for food now because you can't even stand in line to buy food almost at any of the restaurants, the quick serve restaurants.
Well, we actually didn't run into any problems with any of the quick serve. They were still
okay, good.
We were still able to. It wasn't mandatory because I know when they first opened after COVID, that was the only way you could.
All right, then I'll save
make
that complaint for
reservations.
Studios because I have a very specific complaint about that in Studios.
So Epcot, we really didn't do any because the food and wine was going on, so that you had to go to the little individual booths, and they weren't really that busy. And then after that, we kind of cut our day early because that was our first day in the park. It was extremely hot, and there was so much lack of shaded areas for us to go and hide that we just kind of called it a day just because we were just overheated by that point. So we really didn't have a big quick service meal. We just kind of snacked.
So we weren't there long enough for it to really be a problem.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So then we go to Hollywood Studios. Again, crowded. Don't know why. The restriction to the quick serve I had a problem with here because it was hot. Normally when it's hot, I'll go into the ABC commissary just to cool off, sit in a corner somewhere, relax. Couldn't get in if I didn't have a food order. They literally had bouncers sitting outside the entrance, not letting people in.
Right.
How do you do that? It's like getting a reservation at McDonald's. It's idiotic.
Right. I didn't understand that. But you did eventually get in because you said you were just going
They stuck me in a corner, literally between two pillars to charge the scooter.
When I went to go find you, I'm like, where the heck is he?
Now I give total props to all the cast members that were there because they were making sure I was okay. They were offering me water. The one woman comes over and asks if I wanted to have a cupcake. So the staff was fantastic, but the policies I think were terrible.
That's I think what it is it's the policies that other people put into place, and now you have these cast members that are the ones enforcing it and are like, oh.
So the other thing that bugged me was I was very much looking forward to going to Galaxy's Edge, going to Doc Ondar's, and shopping and buying some of the unique stuff. And they didn't have jack in there.
Right.
Not only did they not have anything cool, new, or interesting, they had a 20-minute wait in line to look at the lightsabers that they had in the case if you wanted to buy something.
Mm-hmm.
A 20-minute wait to spend $200 and some dollars.
Yeah, that is crazy.
That's ridiculous. And they had a guy sitting there enforcing, almost like he had a cattle prod, making sure people were bunched up on top of each other because the lines were packed so tight.
Right.
That was such a turnoff for me. It
Yeah.
really was. What else do we have? Finding a seat at the quick serve was like, almost impossible. You had people just circling around waiting for someone to get up.
Right. Now, we did eat at the docking station.
Right.
And that, again, didn't have a problem, because they asked when you got there, did you do a mobile order or are you placing an order? Because they had two separate lines.
Right. They let you get in to order something, which was nice because I could at least get in and cool off.
Right. And then, just like, the quick serve. But we've had that before where there weren't always tables available depending on what time.
Well, before our quick serve was always the way that we went because or the mobile ordering was how we went because that was our secret weapon.
Right. And now everybody does it, so of course you need the app to do it, and but it worked out. We still got a meal, we still had a table.
Couldn't book anything with Savi's workshop to build a lightsaber.
Well, and honestly, if we had tried to book it when we had made our reservations, we probably would have.
Shouldn't have to book spending $400.
I understand that.
6 months in advance. I shouldn't have to do that.
Right. But that's the thing is when we went 2 years ago, we made those reservations as soon as we could make them and got them.
My biggest concern here was I couldn't even see that there weren't reservations or how to make that. It wasn't even an option. Right. It took you a while to find
because
them.
I had to search. I did a search for Savi's and
right.
Again, it was a whole secret thing because if I didn't know what to call it, I wouldn't have been able to find it. There was nothing obvious. Again, you had to search, but you had to know what you were searching for. So
there were far fewer character interactions at Galaxy's Edge this time than the last time. Mm-hmm. Everywhere you looked, last time we were there was a character you were bumping into them left and right.
Right.
There were 2 or 3.
Kylo Ren and some stormtroopers.
Right.
That was
and
about
at one point in time, Chewbacca and somebody else was up on a platform somewhere.
Oh, see, I didn't even see them.
You couldn't interact with them. They were basically up there just waving at people like it was a parade float.
Right. Well, that even happened when we were in Epcot. Pooh Bear was behind a fence.
Oh, yeah. They stuck him out in the sun.
The poor Pooh Bear. Man. He was melting, I'm sure. Yeah. So.
The other issue I had was solo rider times, not single rider. It was solo rider at Smuggler's Run, which I thought was funny.
Right.
They don't publish them.
Right.
You didn't know. The only way we knew it was a 5-minute single rider line was because we overheard someone say it. And we're like, excuse me, how long is a single rider? And they're like, 5 minutes. I'm like, all right, let's go.
Right.
And like one other person did the same thing. And it's like, given how bad your application works for booking these rides, how are you not? It's not up on the signs.
Right.
Nobody's out there. They had one cast member come out and start saying, hey, 5-minute single rider ride if anybody wants to get on.
Right.
How do you not have a provision for that?
Right. And that's something. So going back to Epcot, Test Track has been a single rider ride for as long as I can remember. So most people know about it. So they have, 3 separate entrances for it. And then, of course, as soon as you get close, they're like, oh, don't forget, your party will be separated, blah, 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 blah. And you go on. I had only known about Soarin' having it from watching somebody else's video. So if I didn't watch that other person's video, I wouldn't have known. And I think at Soarin', they're still doing it as a test. It's not official. And again, we had gotten it as the one lightning lane, and when we went up I was like, oh, are you guys still doing, oh look, and they basically just have like a cast member holding a sign saying single rider, and then you go on. Smuggler's Run, I wasn't sure if they were doing it until we got to the front of it and we're like, oh, okay, great. And we, I think it took us longer to walk the whole entrance.
That's just poor planning and poor execution on Disney's part. That's a major selling point that you could be using to enhance people's visits there, especially with the crappy system that you put in place instead of the fast passes.
Right.
So we, at one point in time, wanted to go over to Star Wars Launch Bay and cool off, look at the stuff they had there, see if there's anything to shop for. And it was literally a ghost town.
Right.
They shut down the Little Mermaid thing that was there. They shut down the gift shop that was there.
Right. Little Mermaid has been shut down since.
But everything was shut down. The only thing that was open was a couple of the Play Disney thing.
Right. But they did have Star Wars characters. That was still open.
Yeah, if you walked 5 miles back.
Well, that was the whole thing, right?
Because they weren't advertising it anymore.
Right. Well, no, they had the sign when you got to the area, so you had to know. But yeah, that was the whole thing because the Launch Bay area, there was the whole shop there, and then you'd walk through the shop, and then they'd have the characters and artifacts from the from the movies and things.
It was like just a completely forgotten area.
Right. It was just kind of, and the other thing too was it closed at 5.
Right.
So then that whole section, even though there wasn't a whole lot to the section to begin with, became even more of a ghost town because again, you already had the Little Mermaid that they haven't reopened Little Mermaid yet. So the little princess store right next to it, that shut down. Then there's a Play Disney gift shop that hasn't opened yet. So you had the couple of characters, but no gift shop. And then you had...
Like at that point in time, just shut the whole area down and block it off.
Exactly.
You're just... It's ridiculous to even have a couple of things open.
Right.
Like I went to get the scooter. I could have swore I saw a tumbleweed blow through. It was so deserted over there.
Well, the squirrels were more entertaining over there.
It was embarrassing.
Yeah, it was kind of sad. And the other thing too was like Maddie and I did the Muppet movie, and there's a Muppet gift shop as soon as you get out. And I was like, all right, as soon as we get out, we'll go into the, gift shop to cool off. And that wasn't open too. So that was really kind of the first, seeing a lot of the gift shops that weren't open, because in Epcot doesn't have as many little gift shops along the way because you have all of the different countries, so all of those were open. So we really didn't see the effect of things until we got, to Epcot.
All right, 5 minutes, Magic Kingdom, and then we got to summarize.
Okay.
Go ahead. You go.
Okay, so for the Magic Kingdom, that was our Halloween party. As you had mentioned before, with the Halloween party, they let you get into the park 3 hours before your park time. So, of course, there's, tons of lines to try and get in, everybody to get in. And, of course, because of the holiday party, you have a special band, so it takes longer to get in. And, of course, the storms are coming. So you got people that are trying to leave the park, people trying to come in the park. So, of course, very crowded, at the beginning of it. And it always seems to be kind of disorganized no matter what time you go. So I don't know if it's something where if we actually went closer to 7 o'clock or closer to 6 o'clock, if we wouldn't run into that or not.
Well, and what would make sense if they did that is you do a rope drop type thing. Mm-hmm. And for all the people who are coming in for the party, you get them checked in, you get their bands on in that time ahead of time because they're all queuing up.
Yeah, because that happened
and then you have a rope drop when you let them in.
Because that happened when we did, when we did the Christmas party?
I think it was a Christmas party.
Where you actually checked in at the Polynesian.
Right.
And you got your band and everything. So you were already checked in. So as soon as you got off the monorail, you went right in. So they need to kind of go back to that system of, checking in someplace else. Mm-hmm. I will say, though, that their security system has gotten better because they don't do every bag being checked.
Right.
So you kind of go through a metal detector, some sort of scanning thing.
I don't know if that's better or if it's just more lax to get people through.
I don't know, but it seemed to go smoother. So that was at least a positive that I saw. But obviously here was another instance. Now, again, don't know how much of it was because it was the holiday party or not. But again, we saw a lot of different shops that were closed. But
Right.
again, not every shop is always open for the holiday party.
Well, and some of the shops we know were closed because they turned them into other things.
Right, exactly. And then some rides or certain attractions, they turn over to trick-or-treating, areas. The one thing that was bizarre was, because again, they have all these different trick-or-treating sections, and they didn't start handing out candy until 7 o'clock. And at one point, we were in Tomorrowland, and it was 6 o'clock, and there was a line forming
And they
for
were letting people
people
form a line, which was
to wait for
idiotic.
candy,
Yeah.
for free candy.
For a couple pieces of candy you'd get.
So we were just like, no, we're going to go on some other rides. So that was kind of crazy. But once the party kind of started, and also once the rain kind of died down, we really didn't have too many issues. It kind of spread out because then you have the people, because there are people that go to the party just to go and see the specialty characters that only come out for the holiday party.
Right.
Then you have people that are just doing the trick-or-treating. Then you have some people that are there to see the special Halloween parade and to see the special Halloween fireworks. So it kind of helps to break it up, because that's when Maddie was able to get on Splash Mountain in 5 minutes. Big Thunder Mountain in 5 minutes. I think Space Mountain was 20 minutes. I think that was her longest wait. Haunted Mansion, I think it was about 20 minutes, maybe even less, for us to get on that.
So let's summarize before we leave here.
Sure.
Give me a score, 1 out of 10, 10 being the highest of your overall Disney experience. Give me that artificially high score you're going to give me.
7.
Really? Wow, I would not have thought it would have been that low.
Really?
Yeah.
You would have thought I would have given it higher.
I thought you would have been an 8 or a 9.
Ha ha!
I'd probably give it about a 5.
Mm-hmm.
And really my problem was more with management and execution.
Mm-hmm.
Poor planning, and you can blame it on the fact that they haven't brought all their staff back, whatever you want to blame it on.
Yeah.
But there's ways to compensate for that. And to me, it was a disappointing experience.
The one highlight of our trip, and I think we can both agree on this.
Steve from Brooklyn. Absolutely. Steve from Brooklyn. He was so close to restoring my faith in Disney. He was so optimistic. He was the best bus driver we ever had.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He was so good, I almost want to use Facebook again so I can follow him. Almost. But Facebook's too evil.
Right. So fortunately, I'm already friends with him. So, and I had been friends with him already. And when he pulled up, I was like,
I'm
Facebook friends with you.
Magical experience. And I don't use that term very often for Disney, but that was a magical experience. And I thank him for that.
Yes.
All right, that is all we had for today, and probably that's more than enough. We kind of cut some of my complaints short because I, do have a heart condition with blood pressure and everything. So, before we do go though, I would like to once again invite our listening and viewing audience to subscribe to the podcast. You can find audio versions listed as Insights into Entertainment. Audio and video versions of all of our network's podcasts can be found under Insights into Things. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, etc. I would also ask you to write in, give us your feedback. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com.
You can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/insights_things.
We do stream 5 days a week on Twitch at twitch.tv/insightsintothings.
You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast.
We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/insightsintothings.
We're also on Instagram at instagram.com/insightsintothings.
Or you can find all that and much more on our official website at insightsintothings.com. That's it. Another one in the books.
Have a good week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com.
Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Tomorrow, where we take a deeper look into how the issues of today will impact the world of tomorrow. From politics and world news to media and technology, we discuss how today's headlines are becoming tomorrow's reality.
Welcome to Insight into Tomorrow. This is episode 17, Women's Rights Are Human Rights. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and my special guest host this week from our Insights into Entertainment podcast, Michelle Whalen. How you doing today, Michelle?
Full of many, many emotions.
I can imagine. We had actually planned on doing this podcast for a little while now. We've been working on putting it together and stuff.
Right.
Understanding that there was going to be an impending decision. And today was the scheduled day that we were going to do this.
Right. Not knowing
that yesterday was going to be the day that the other shoe dropped.
Right.
So we're going to continue to go through the material that we did plan, and we reserved the last segment to have an open discussion on the groundbreaking, rule-shattering, country-damaging decision, I think, that came yesterday. So there's been a disturbing trend in recent years in the United States. There's been an assault on women's, an assault has been waged on basic human rights. Victims of this assault have been chosen by color of their skin and their gender and various other things. All are victims that have been targeted for generations and have fought for their equal human rights. In this episode of Insights into Tomorrow, we're going to take a deeper look at the assault specifically on women's rights. We'll take a look at the history of women's rights through the years. We'll examine the current state of women's rights, and we'll explore the threats against those rights. Before we leave, we'll take a special look at the current issue of abortion and the not-so-impending Supreme Court decision that threatens to overturn, which it did overturn, Roe versus Wade. But before we do that, I'd like to take a moment to invite our listening and viewing audiences to subscribe to the podcast. You can find audio versions of this podcast listed as Insights into Tomorrow. You can find video and audio of all the network's podcasts listed as Insights into Things, and you can pick those up anywhere you can get a podcast these days. We're pretty much everywhere. I would also invite you to write in, give us your comments, give us your feedback, tell us how we're doing. Email us at comments@insightsintothings.com, where you can find links to all of our social media on our official website at www.insightsintothings.com. Are we ready?
As ready as we'll ever be.
Let's get into it.
So, all women are entitled to human rights. These include the right to live free from violence and discrimination, to enjoy the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, to be educated, and to own property, to vote, and to earn an equal wage. Across the globe, many women and girls still face discrimination on the basis of sex and gender. Gender inequality underpins many problems which disappropriately affect women and girls, such as domestic and sexual violence, lower pay, lack of access to education, and inadequate health care. For many years, women's rights movements have fought hard to address these inequalities, campaigning to change laws or taking to the streets to demand their rights are respected. And new movements have flourished in the digital age, such as the Me Too campaign, which highlights the prevalence of gender-based violence and sexual harassment.
So there has been a fairly long history of women's fight for their rights, in the United States at least, because when the country was formed, there was no explicit provisions in the Constitution for women's rights to anything.
Mm-hmm.
The Constitution protected, quote, consent of the government, consent of the governed, which at the time meant white landholding men
Mm-hmm.
only.
Right.
The Bill of Rights did not protect everyone either. Women were considered second-class citizens. They were essentially property of their husbands.
So women started to organize as early as the Seneca Falls Convention in July of 1848. It planted the seeds for the women's suffrage movement. It pushed for equal rights for all people of all races and sexes. The end result was the signing of the Declaration of Sentiments by 100 men and women, a document based on the Declaration of Independence.
So we move into the women's suffrage movement. This is really probably the foundation for the first fight for women's rights. Wyoming passed the first law granting women the right to vote in 1869 and was the first state to grant women the right to vote in all elections in 1890. But it took until 1920 for the 19th Amendment to the Constitution to allow women the right to vote across the country.
So now let's talk a little bit about abortion and contraception. So there were widespread anti-contraception laws on the books as late as 1819 before they were challenged, starting with Margaret Sanger in New York. Abortion laws criminalized the act of ending a pregnancy apart from saving a woman's life were in place and well into the 60s before any challenges were raised. These obviously culminated into the 1973 Roe v. Wade Supreme Court ruling that being drawn into question, unfortunately, as of yesterday.
Yeah. So then we move on to women's equal employment and equal pay. The first minimum wage laws applied to women didn't come into effect until 1912. This was later superseded by the 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act, imposing a federal minimum age regardless of gender. It wasn't until 1963 with the Equal Pay Act that any attention was given to equitable wages, wages too probably, but wages for the same work performed by men. It took until 1974 for Congress to include gender protection in fair housing and education as part of the Civil Rights Act. Now, it's worth noting that even though these laws were on the books, they're on the books today. They're not observed. There's still discrimination today, despite the fact that we have these laws on the books.
Right, exactly. And finally, leadership in government. So the first woman to serve in Congress was Jeanette Pickering Rankin, who didn't take her seat until 1917. but it would take nearly 100 years for a woman to take on the leadership role of Speaker of the House when Nancy Pelosi assumed that role for the first time in 2007. And we didn't see our first Supreme Court justice until 1981 with Sandra Day O'Connor. And Madeleine Albright was our first Secretary of State in 1997. And obviously, our first female Vice President, Kamala Harris, in 2020.
So, the disturbing trend that I see in this history here is there's spurts of progress. There's long periods where there's no progress. Then you get a few exceptional people that just get mad as hell and they're not going to take it anymore, and they do something about it.
Yep.
And the establishment throws a couple of crumbs out there and gives a little bit of rights to people. And then there's a long period of time until it happens again.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think this compares to other fights, civil rights, for instance? How do you think this compares to civil rights for African Americans and minorities?
It's almost the same, really, when you think about it. Unless you are a rich white male, you're fighting every day, and maybe once in a while something comes along that you get something, and then unfortunately something else in the news is going to pop up where everybody's mindset is on something else, and that fight still hasn't been won.
Yeah.
And until something happens with that fight again, everybody kind of forgets about it, because again, our attention span, is, we have short attention span theater, of our minds. Look at, not to get on a totally different tangent, but all of the school shootings, it's been how many weeks and none of that is in the news. There, you have the gun reforms that they're trying to pass. But again, now that you have everything going on with Roe v. Wade, that's the main focus. But yet there's other things that still need to be focused. Black Lives Matter still needs to be a focus, because you had everything that went on with George Floyd and all the other African Americans who, with the police issues and things like that, and none of that was solved, but because something else came along, oh, well, now our attention, but no, you have to go back and do all the other things.
It's funny you mention that. What do you think is the cause of that? Is that a media issue? Is that a society issue? Is it a politics issue where politicians don't want to deal with the issue, so they distract with something else? Or is it media just trying to get ratings that's dictating what our issues are today?
I don't know. I think it's a little bit of. I think everybody's a little bit to blame with all of that, because obviously media is one aspect, and when you kind of think back of, okay, well, why did it take so long? So Wyoming, it was the 1800s when, Wyoming, but it wasn't until the 1900s that it was actually, and you have to think back then, how long did it take for news to travel? How long, same thing with Juneteenth. It was signed into law that blacks were no longer slaves, but how many years did it take for the news to actually travel? Right. There was no quick way to do it, where now we have that instant gratification. We can, as soon as news broke yesterday of the Supreme Court's decision, everybody in the world knew about it. So I think a lot of it is because we're so hungry for information right now, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What do I need to do? And also, we're all so tired. We're all so tired of having to stand up for everybody. And there's just so much injustice. It's like, well, where do I put my my energy.
Where's my next fight? Yeah.
And it's like, I have no more spoons to give. My jar is empty because I've given, so much, because there's so much that's needed, from all of us. I think that's, where it comes to, because there's obviously thousands and thousands of organizations and different things that are in need, but it's, how much can the average person give before you have nothing left to give?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely been a problem. Let's take a little break. We'll come back and we're going to talk a little bit more detail about where we are right now with these specific women's rights. We'll be right back. For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com.
So let's talk about the current state of women's rights. And we'll talk first about women's suffrage. At the moment, it's safe to say that fight has been won, I guess, kind of, sort of, in the general statement, yes.
If nothing else, we can say that women are equally discriminated against with everyone else when it comes to your right to vote these days.
Yes.
Okay, there's no special discrimination
right,
against women on this one.
Okay, we can go with that. Abortion and contraception. Well, this had been won, but it looks like it might be a split decision with the much anticipated ruling from the majority right-wing Supreme Court that was held yesterday. And we'll have more on this later on in the show.
So we take a look at employment and pay. So legally on paper, this was a win back in 1963 with the Equal Pay Act. Do you feel like this was a win?
No.
And I think most women would be of the same opinion. In practice, there's a long fight ahead of this one. Progress continues to be made, but not nearly enough to level the playing field between men and women, equal pay, equal work. It's a mess. And the fact that people are still getting away with it is frankly disturbing, that you can get away with it.
Yep.
Leadership in government. There was a surprising amount of progress early on this, but it's been painfully slow in coming into the modern time. Since, the 80s, 2000, we've seen some progress here. Many parts of the country are progressive enough to make the progress that's needed. There are other parts, and less progressive, less evolved parts of the country, where politics is still an old boys network. But from a national standpoint, we're seeing, we have a female vice president now, which is huge. How do you think, let's talk women's suffrage, your ability to vote. Do you feel you have the ability to go out there and vote when you want, for who you want, how you want?
Absolutely. And that's something I've never felt I wasn't able to do. I've never felt that I wasn't allowed. Even in high school, senior year was when I turned 18, and I had a history teacher who was very passionate about the women's movement and made sure she had her little pamphlets in her desk drawer, and who's turning 18 this month, fill out your form so you can vote. And she said it doesn't matter if it's a presidential election, if it's a governor election, even your little local election, you will vote every time because there are women that died doing this. It is your heritage. It is your responsibility to pass this on and make sure you vote.
How do you think how can I say this without getting hate mail? How do you think the outcome of the 2020 election
or the 2016 election, we can even go.
You could, but specifically the 2020 election, in which there was an artificial stigma built up about the legitimacy of the election and voting and voter fraud. And it drew the entire country into that. And now we're seeing certain states that support a certain party are now imposing laws that, if not discriminating against people from voting,
will make it harder,
making it much more
absolutely
difficult.
And that's...
Do you feel threatened by that?
Fortunately, I don't, because at this point we are in a very blue state, and I've never felt threatened going to our polling places. We don't have far to travel. We usually never have more than 5 minutes to wait, if we even have a wait whenever we've gone. And I know that's not the case for states right next to ours, where people will wait in line hours to cast their vote, or have to travel, an hour to get to their polling place. And I would probably feel intimidated if I had to go through all those measures, and almost jump through hoops to fulfill my civic duty.
Right.
And nobody should have to feel that way to do that.
Absolutely. Abortion and contraception. So for now, we're going to put abortion aside because we already have a discussion on the last segment. Contraception.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that you can acquire the contraception that you want, and that the health care that you need as far as women's health is readily available to you? Do you think that's a threat? Do you think progress needs to be made on that front?
So, again, being a white female, a middle-class white female in a blue state, I don't feel discriminated at all against any healthcare. I know that's not the case for others of my gender in other parts of our country. That now that is something that there are rumors about being taken away. Now you see all over social media people saying, if you're on some sort of IUD, if you're on any sort of implant, get it replaced now. Anything that, has a couple of years, because we don't know what's coming down the pike. The fact that some male can make a decision what I do with my body absolutely blows my mind. And that, whether or not I'm a married woman or a single woman should have nothing to do with it either. And that if I want to have a child, it should be by choice.
Right.
I should not be forced. I am still of age where I could have a child. I am not at a point where I would want to begin that process all over again. And I need to have that body autonomy. That's my right to decide that, and nobody else should decide it. I don't make a decision for anybody if they want to be on Viagra or not, or if they want to get, reconstructive surgery or I don't make that decision for anybody else. So nobody should be making a decision for what I do to myself.
And I agree 110%. As long as you don't expect the government to pay for it, then it's your say what you do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm totally down with that.
Mm-hmm.
Employment and pay. Where do we stand with this? Do you think there's sufficient progress? Do you think you're compensated fairly for what you do? And do you think that there is a threat to that looming?
I don't know. It's one of those things because, of course, at most places of employment, one of the rules is you don't talk about how much you make. So, you don't find out how much somebody else is making. So that's a really hard, I know, or I shouldn't say I assume within the company that I work in, there are people that work in the North Jersey facility that make much more money than the people in the South Jersey facility.
And that's unusual because of geographics.
Right, absolutely. But again, it shouldn't matter where I'm physically located because I'm doing just as much work as
there's certain factors
else.
Like cost of living and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
That you have to factor in
totally. I totally.
But compensation-wise, on a 1-to-1 ratio, are you being fairly compensated?
I really don't know because it's one of the things that probably bad on me is I kind of stopped paying attention because there's always these websites you can go to and say, how much does a person that does this job make? And the thing is, what I do for a living is kind of specific to my job, so it's kind of hard to say if I went someplace else where I could kind of try and figure it out. And I think I know I'm probably underpaid. Just one, because I'm,
is it because you're a woman or because you're a one-of-a-kind person doing what you do?
I don't know. It might be a combination of both. We recently at my company had somebody who left the company who was a woman. I never asked her or found out how much she made. I knew she probably made more than I did, even though I've been with the company much longer than she had been. And we recently hired somebody who I knew was a grade level or a position higher than her. And I have a feeling probably started out making more than she did.
Okay.
So that's another,
So clearly we're not where we need to be.
No.
Leadership in government. So my question to you here is, clearly we're seeing progress certainly on the federal level. Mm-hmm. A lot of states are making progress with women in leadership positions. You personally, do you think the door is open for you if you wanted to get into, say, local politics? Do you think you'd have any obstacles with that? Do you think you'd be discriminated against because of your gender?
I don't know. I think in a lot of cases it's still a boys' club when you come to, your local. But I'm sure there are some areas of the country where it's not like that. I've never been interested in wanting to run for a government position, so it was never something that I thought about. But I could see where I wouldn't, again, where we live, where we are. I'm sure if it was something where I started volunteering or doing things, I could, eventually see something.
What's interesting is of the 4 fundamental rights that we talked about, 3 of these you attributed to some level of political influence on how it impacts you.
Mm-hmm.
That's disturbing. That women's rights are a matter of politics.
And they shouldn't be.
No, they shouldn't. And I think that is a highlight of where we are today. And it astounds me, and we're not going to pull any punches here. You're obviously a Democratic supporter.
I am. How did you know?
What astounds me is your experience, I would say, is pretty typical for most women, Democratic women or Republican women. But there are so many staunch Republican women that support a party that has, for over a century, had policies that were contrary to women's interests.
Mm-hmm.
And what is it about people like that who would support someone who wants to hold you down? Like, is it I almost attribute it to like a beaten wife syndrome type thing.
Yeah.
Where they just accept their place as a lesser citizen in society.
And you have to kind of think that, there are still women that are young girls, women that are raised today to your only job in life is to raise the family and support your husband. And that's it. And I'm not knocking anyone that's what they want to do in their life. If that's
what you aspire to do, knock your socks off.
Right.
But don't hold other people back.
Exactly.
In the process.
But don't tell me that I can't do more.
Absolutely.
Or tell my daughter that she can't be more.
Yeah, that's my hang up about this whole thing. As much as I hate seeing how you are treated, it irks me to think that she's going to face some of these same prejudices, and it really pisses me off.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to do everything I can to make sure that she's got every opportunity.
And I'm so proud of what she stands for and what she believes in. And yes, a lot of it has to do with us, but there's a lot that, is her own, and I'm so glad that we raised her and are still raising her to be so open-minded to things. And she, in so many cases, is more open-minded than we will ever be. And that gives me hope that, she's also surrounded, she surrounds herself with people that feel that way too.
Yeah.
And that generation will hopefully make a difference and bring about so much that more than we could ever hope for.
I'm also very fortunate that she's patient enough to help
educate,
carry me along in that journey.
Yes.
I've learned a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned a lot from her that I never thought I would learn.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take another break, and when we come back, we're going to take a look at what some of the obstacles and threats are to these rights. We'll be right back.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings.
Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
So, threats and obstacles to women's rights in America. And, we'll attack these rights as we've been doing in order. So the first one we're going to talk about is women's suffrage. So in the wake of the toxic 2020 elections, there's been a wholesale attack on voting rights. These attacks aren't targeted specifically at women and are designed to make it harder for people in general to vote. Not too much in general, but there's specific segments of the population that are targeted at. So some of the obstacles. 17 states have enacted 28 new laws that restrict access to voting by targeting citizens with disabilities. The fact that they're not including accessibility, common accessibility options to get into voting places that make it difficult for people with disabilities to vote. Mm-hmm. They're attacking absentee voting. After the 2020 election, when when absentee voting was done because we were in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
A pandemic that the sitting president ignored for the first 4 months and downplayed it and pretended it didn't exist and created the crisis in the first place.
Right.
They're attacking provisional ballots. They're requiring voter ID, which there's nothing. Take a drink here. I'm joking to death here. This is how much I hate these rules. There's nothing in the Constitution that says voter ID is required to cast your vote. Nowhere. So I don't know where they're coming up with that one. They're targeting voter registration. They're making it harder to register. Mm-hmm. They're requiring different requirements to now register. They're instituting registration purging. So normally with registration purging, if you don't vote in so many elections, they purge you from the voter registration roll. Well, that number of elections is usually like 4, 5, something like that, presidential elections. Now they're saying if you don't vote in the last one, you're not registered anymore.
Oh, see,
You need to register again to vote. They're restricting student voting, making it difficult for students, because before they would make it accessible to students to vote during student hours and stuff like that at colleges. They're restricting that. And they're limiting polling places to make it harder to vote. So people who are, again, disabled, infirmed, aged, people that don't drive, they're making them travel hours to get to a voting place to cast a vote, knowing that they won't vote because they're the people that they don't want voting because they're going to vote for the opposition.
Right.
So that's some of what we're looking at here. Not specifically against women, but affecting everybody.
Right. And you figure it's the lower income, more likely the people of color.
Yep.
That's the areas that they're really targeting.
Absolutely. So what's your next one?
Abortion. Somehow, after nearly 50 years, this is still a matter of debate. Instead of being an ideological discussion, anything to do with abortions has turned into a political discussion, which generally means that all logic is out the window with it. There is a real threat to women's reproductive rights with the recent leaked draft of the opinion by the Supreme Court that now wasn't just a leak, because now it has come to fruition that they have now overturned Roe v. Wade.
More on that later.
Later on.
Deep cleansing breaths.
Deep cleansing breaths. Okay. Let's go back to employment and pay. So on average, women earn 82 cents for every dollar that a man earns. And in comparing salaries over 350 jobs, women actually earn less in nearly all jobs. Women earn less than their same race and ethnicity, their counterparts at entry-level positions of education attained as well. So the pandemic is estimated to have set the women's labor force back more than 30 years.
So there's that progress that we're losing.
That astonishes me that during the pandemic that even, happened. Finally, leadership in government. Again, we now finally have a woman vice president. How many years did that take? And then you even look back, how far was when the first vice president, female vice president, was in the 80s, late 80s, and then
Geraldine Ferraro.
Nomination, never elected. And then you even had Sarah Palin, the second, never elected.
Right.
So it took 3 women, but how many years, obviously, to get to that position? Another interesting thing, for the first time in our history as a government, there will be 2 female signatures posted on currency in our country, because we will have the treasurer Secretary of the Treasurer, and what's the other signature that's on the bill? I can't think of what it is, but that was something that came out in the news because of a newly appointed position. Top 2 women in money.
Right. See, and I'll tell you, while that's nice that we've gotten to that point, what annoys me is every time the press takes this is the first time a woman did this, and this is the first time a woman...
Right.
It annoys me that we're saying that.
Right. It's annoying that we have to say anything like that. And when you look at... Obviously, there are other countries in the world that will never have women in government. But then there are other countries that have had women in leadership and had women in politics so much longer, and they kind of look at us and go, how backwards are you?
And these women were incredibly strong, competent women who overshadowed their previous male counterparts by a long shot,
right,
in most cases.
So it just baffles me, with as progressive as we say we are as a country, we're so backwards than so much more.
Well, and the thing that annoys me when we say it's the first woman to do this, that fact doesn't annoy me. But what annoys me is that attention that we draw to it being the first woman to do that is the same attention that the detractors use. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, you have a first woman in the Treasury, and look at what the economy's like, as if it's their fault,
right?
And they use that fact that they're a woman as justification for how things are and the state of, and it annoys me that they do that.
Right, and the other thing too is how many women had to do so many other things to get that person, to lift that woman up.
Absolutely.
To do that. That's the thing. Standing
on the shoulders of giants.
Absolutely.
And women like Kamala Harris was extremely complimentary and appreciative of all the women that came before her that gave her the opportunity that she has today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a lot of obstacles out there that we need to
we've come far, but we haven't come far enough.
Right. And it's almost like the old boys network, their attitude's almost like, all right, well, we threw you a bone, now shut up and go away for a while, okay? You're fine. Like, they're terrified of having an equal playing field, and they think trickling little bits out here and there will keep the masses occupied and quiet them down when they get a little riled up, which is unfortunate. That's why you The one thing that I think might come out of this Supreme Court ruling is that a lot of rich white guys might not have a career in politics moving forward anymore.
Let's hope and pray.
We'll talk about
prayers
that.
and thoughts.
We're going to take our last break, and we'll talk about that when we come back.
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
So, women's rights are human rights.
Damn Skippy.
And as of yesterday, I think we've seen a significant encroachment upon women's rights.
You think?
So, this is our open discussion on Roe versus Wade and abortion in general. You have the floor, dear.
I don't even know where to
Rip into it. How about we start with just the hypocrisy of the Supreme Court's decision? Because the day before, they had a very contradictory decision.
Absolutely. They said that you could carry a gun, that it's okay to carry around a gun now. You don't need to conceal it anymore.
Right. So New York had some very common sense gun safety laws.
For over 100 years.
Designed to save lives.
Right.
Which the Supreme Court decided that was a constitutional violation.
Right.
Where if you read the Constitution and the Second Amendment, nowhere in there does it say anything about carrying concealed weapons by citizens.
Right.
It speaks entirely about pertaining to a well-regulated militia.
Right.
Which for some reason everyone seems to want to ignore that. So
right.
So
because it's all up for interpretation. Yep. That's what it is.
So the Supreme Court decides that we're going to do away with common sense gun law because it's against people's constitutional rights. Mm-hmm. But now you can't get an abortion.
Nope.
So we're preserving life on one side with overturning Roe versus Wade, but we really don't give a damn about it because you can carry guns and shoot anybody you want.
Right. So one of the memes, our government is bold enough to force you to have a kid, but is too weak to ensure that they make it to recess alive.
Yeah.
If that is not...
That's profound.
With between the past 2 days of the Supreme Court, that... How?
Yeah, it highlights the ludicrous level of hypocrisy coming out of today's Supreme Court.
Right. The fact that church and state is supposed to be separate, but yet the church has more say over my body, and I'm not a member of a church.
Right.
My religion... I am Jewish, if you didn't know. My religion states abortion is okay. Because my life is more important than what is in my body, what is in my womb. Yeah. And until what is growing in my womb can live and take 3 breaths on its own, it doesn't have a choice over me.
Well, you could also interpret the 2 rulings from the Supreme Court of you can have an abortion as long as you don't mind getting shot in the process.
Right. Right. And unfortunately, there has been violence that has happened at clinics that aren't even performing abortions. Because that's the other thing, is that everybody goes after Planned Parenthood. Oh, they're doing all these abortions and da-da-da-da. That's not even their main purpose. That they are giving health care to women, and somebody going there just for a routine checkup is risking their life from these crazy psychopaths who are trying to save the unborn child, but yet are taking their gun to go kill people.
Well, and to play devil's advocate for a minute there, you have people who are pro-abortion who are also attacking anti-abortion clinics as well. So you've got violence on both sides. You've got crimes being committed on both sides. But if nothing else, that should simply highlight the level of passion involved here, that the decision that the Supreme Court made to overturn a previous Supreme Court decision, which, honestly, that's where I have my biggest problem, is the Supreme Court has basically made itself useless.
Right.
They decided that no matter what we decide, it doesn't matter because the guys 5 years from now can overturn it.
Right, and that's where now... Okay, so everybody's, kind of, you have the people that are like, oh, well, it's still at the state level and da-da-da-da-da, and now you can still travel to get to states even though they were passing laws saying that you couldn't, and that there were certain laws where, if the doctor performed one, they were going to be jailed, and the woman who received it was going to be jailed, and all this other... But this isn't where it's going to stop.
Right.
That's the thing that most people aren't looking at, is now that you've taken this away, now all these other rights of, gay and lesbian couples, you're seeing that there are people out there that are, get a hold of a lawyer, make sure everything is written and that you have legal documentation. If you have children, make sure there is legal documentation. Make sure you have copies of your birth certificates and everything, that both parents are listed. If you got married in a state that is in danger of overturning your marriage decision, I have various clergy friends that are now offering free to remarry you in a state that is protecting you. And the contraception, that's another thing that now, oh, thank God for Clarence Thomas, for everything. But you know what law he's not going to overturn is Loving, because that affects him, because he's married to a lovely white woman but all the recent things he's picking in, oh, well, I can't do that one, but I can do this one.
And this is the problem that I have, is that our current Supreme Court has turned into an activist court.
Mm-hmm.
And their job is to rule on the constitutionality of laws and situations.
Right.
It's not to make new laws. It's not to overturn laws. The Supreme Court should never be able to overturn a Supreme Court decision.
Right.
Because the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court.
Right.
It's the law of the land.
Right.
If they can overturn their own decisions, where do you go from there?
Right, exactly. And that's the thing, is now what else is on the books that you can overturn?
Right. The only way a Supreme Court decision should be overturned is with a constitutional amendment.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing that should overturn.
Right.
So a couple of things that come out of this. One, you're going to see an assault on other freedoms that the right-wing nut jobs in the Supreme Court don't agree with. That's the number one concern. Number two, you're going to push decisions like this down to the state. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have 50 different laws in 50 different states governing all these different things.
We're basically becoming 50 different countries at this point.
Yep. The other problem that I have is now, because you're going to see the Supreme Court overturning Supreme Court precedent, the only way to defend against that is a constitutional amendment. Mm-hmm. And to think of our politics today and who's, how that razor sharp edge that we're on right now between Republican and Democrat, to think that these idiots would contemplate doing amendments to the Constitution terrifies me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, we thought we were ripping the Constitution apart with the 2020 election. These people are just itching to rewrite it in their favor.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what scares me more than anything else. Yes, the whole abortion thing is probably never should have gotten to the Supreme Court, because really it's not, and at least it shouldn't have gotten there in the form that it did, because abortion is not a constitutionally protected right. Your health is, your personal well-being is, and that's how it should have been presented to the Supreme Court, and then you couldn't overturn it at that point.
Right.
But things that go to the Supreme Court now don't matter.
Right.
Because after a couple of years and you get a couple of justices retire, whoever happens to be president at the time, they're going to switch it their way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a real threat that Joe Biden might pack the Supreme Court now because of the situation that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So then, okay, so 5 years down the line, when we have a new president out there, what's going to happen there? Are we going to wind up with 50 Supreme Court justices? Because every time a new president comes in, they want to make sure that the court's tilted in their favor.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's, this decision breaks the country.
Mm-hmm. In so many ways.
Yeah. Do you feel threatened by this?
Absolutely. And fortunately, again, I'm an older woman. Ugh, as much as that hurts me. Who I know if, again, something were to happen, I have the means, I have the ability to get the help that I would need. No matter what, because again, we live in a state where it is still legal and will probably always remain legal. I worry about women, girls, trans men, even, who live in areas where they don't have it accessible and can't get the help that they need.
Yeah.
That's what makes me angry. And, you know, I want to go fight.
What do you think needs to happen to set this right? What does the government, the president, the Supreme Court, citizens, what do we have to do to fix this and have it stay fixed? Because we thought it was fixed.
Right. And that's the thing, is there are certain states where it is fixed. No matter what the law of the land is, it's, you know, it was voted in. And that's, I think, what is so frustrating, is that why does it even need to be that way? Why do people have to vote on it? You know, if I want to go and buy a pack of cigarettes, I can go and buy a pack of cigarettes. What does it matter if I want to, you know, do that? And I've never been a smoker, and you know, I would never want to smoke, but yet you can go and that's what's just so.
Your point there being, it's your body, you can do what you want to do.
Right. You know, and granted, I got into a discussion, a little bit of a debate with a friend of mine that from high school, where, you know, again, my body, my choice, and she's anti-vax and, you know, but very liberal in certain respects and conservative, and, you know, she's kind of like all over the board. Like, she would never get a vaccine because she just doesn't trust the government, you know, and when I, you know, and I said, but, you know, I don't have to do certain things, or I can do certain things. And, you know, she said, well, you wore a mask when you were told to. And I was like, I wore a mask because I was protecting myself. And guess what? I still wear a mask now, even though the majority of the people don't. And yes, I am fully vaccinated and boosted and whatever, but I'm still wearing a mask because I don't want to get sick.
Yeah.
But if, I think back to when I was in college, and if I had gotten pregnant in college, I wasn't ready to be a mother then, so, and then there are women that, have other medical issues. My best friend had to have a late-term abortion because if she had carried her baby to term, she could have died.
Right.
So, it shouldn't be something that's a law that you're forced to do or not to do. It's your body, it's your choice.
And the hypocrisy, again, that we always seem to go back to the hypocrisy of this. So the Supreme Court ruled in a case where members of the armed forces sued the Army or whatever branch of the government, branch of the military they were in, when they were told that they had to get vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
And the Supreme Court ruled they didn't have to. They had a right to choose.
Right.
If you have a right to choose whether or not you take a vaccine, how do you not have a right to choose whether or not you carry a child to term?
Right.
Isn't carrying that child to full term far more impactful than getting a vaccine?
Right.
Where you would think you would have that option?
And the hypocrisy of it, too, is if men had the ability to carry, now granted, trans men can, I don't want to exclude them, but if these white cis men were at risk of their body harming them, because think about it, when and you've mentioned it numerous times, especially watching me go through childbirth and what happened I ended up having to have an emergency C-section because our daughter was in distress, and you got to see firsthand what my body went through. You've said time and time again, there's no way in hell you would have been able to do that.
Right.
And I bet you if you polled, the majority of men, would you be willing to go through childbirth? Would you be willing to do all these things? No. No, they wouldn't. But yet, you'll put your partner or your wife or your mistress, you'll engage in an act and not have any thought process behind that.
Yeah. The other interesting hypocrisy here is they're forcing women to carry children to full term. Are they forcing the sperm donor to be a father, to be there, to have any level of responsibility?
And that's the thing, is that at the moment of conception, that's when you should be paying child support.
Right. Absolutely.
And you don't get to walk away now.
Yep.
That is now, there were a couple of memes like, Happy Father's Day, you're now going to be a dad because of that one night stand, because you decided, you didn't want to put a condom on.
Right. We're up against the clock here, but I did want to raise one more point. We had talked about it off the air, and I think it's worthwhile mentioning because I think it's a great example. Tell us about the adoption one.
Yeah, let me bring that one up. So this was an interesting,
because I thought this was very poignant.
Yes, this was recently posted and is something for the Supreme Court to consider. Can a 13-year-old girl adopt a baby if she wants to? No, obviously not. Are you nuts? What about a 15-year-old girl? Can she adopt a baby if she feels like it? Nope, absolutely not. All right, how about an 18-year-old girl? Surely she could adopt a baby, right? No, still can't. Well, what if she was 20, no longer a teenager? A 20-year-old can definitely adopt a baby if she feels like it, right? Actually, no. Well, weird. Why not? There are over 400,000 children in foster care, so why can't she adopt at least one of them? She just can't. And you know why? Because you have to qualify to adopt a child. There are rigorous background checks, home visits, proof of financial and mental stability, etc. It's a whole thing, right? But if she is 14 and gets impregnated by an abusive ex-boyfriend who shoved her out of his moving car and left her for dead, she must now carry to term, give birth, just figure it out somehow? Yes, that is correct. But she's only 14. She will figure it out. But she should also have been more careful and made better choices. So, to punish her for her poor choices, we force her into motherhood, which we've established she's totally unqualified for. And now we are suddenly comfortable with a young, traumatized girl caring for a vulnerable, little screaming human being that is wholly reliant on her for survival? Yes, absolutely. Such an unexpected blessing.
And I think that right there sums up the problem. We have standards for what it means to be a qualified parent.
Yep.
We enforce them in one instance in adoption. We ignore them completely in every other instance.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else to be said on the matter at this point?
Vote.
Yep.
Stay angry. Let your voice be heard.
That is the only silver lining I see here, is that they're forcing this onto the states, which means your elected leaders will now not be able to hide behind a Supreme Court decision. Mm-hmm. They're going to have to go on record on the voting roll call on whether or not they support this. And unlike the Supreme Court justices, the 3 Supreme Court justices that Trump appointed, who all said on the record that they would not overturn Roe versus Wade, and they did,
right?
You can hold these politicians accountable by voting them out of office.
Absolutely. The other thing, too, is I've seen people posting, I currently live in a red state. I need to move. I had another friend whose children are getting ready to go to college and have now changed which schools they're considering now.
If only we could impeach Supreme Court justices for perjuring themselves during their confirmation hearings.
And that's something, that's making the rounds. So
that's all we had today. Did you have anything else before we go?
Resist.
There you go. Before we do go, I did want to once again invite our listening and viewing audience to subscribe to the podcast. You can find audio versions of this podcast listed as Insights into Tomorrow. Video and audio of all the network's podcasts can be found listed as Insights into Things. We're available on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, anywhere you can get a podcast. We would also ask you to write in, give us your feedback, tell us how we're doing, give us your topics you'd like us to discuss. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com.
You can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/insights_things.
We do stream 5 days a week on Twitch at twitch.tv/insightsintothings.
You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast.
You can find high resolutions of all of our video on YouTube at youtube.com/insightsintothings.
You can find us on Instagram at instagram.com/insightsintothings.
Where you can find links to all this and more on our official website at www.insightsintothings.com. That's it. Another one in the books.
Have a good week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com. Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network.
Welcome to Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Your hosts are Joseph and Madison Whalen, a father and daughter team making their way through the challenges of the teenage years.
Welcome to Insights into Teens. This is episode 156, Teens and Materialism. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and my generous and enterprising co-host, Madison Whalen.
Hi, everyone. Never thought I'd be described as enterprising, but here we are.
Sure, you know how to make a buck, don't you? You do chores, you clean, you do various things to make a couple of bucks here and there.
Fair enough.
That, by definition, makes you enterprising.
All right.
So we are back from an interminably long hiatus here.
Yeah.
Our marching band schedule has just been killing us these last few weeks here. So we've been, I don't know, almost 4 weeks now without a podcast.
Yeah, it's been a bit.
So we're probably still going to be kind of erratic for the month of October, and things probably will settle down for us in November.
Yeah.
We'll probably get back to our regular schedule in November.
Hopefully.
Got to get cracking on our holiday special. We haven't done anything on that yet.
Yeah.
But we are here this week. I don't know if we'll be here next week, so enjoy the show today.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So today we are talking teens and materialism. Teens today are often described as being the most materialistic generation in history. Whether this is accurate or not, it's hard to argue that many teens today do exhibit materialistic tendencies. On this episode of Insights into Teens, we'll explore teen materialism, we'll take a look at the contributing factors, and we'll look at how to help teens cope with materialism. Before we do that, though, I do want to take a moment to invite our listening and viewing audience to subscribe to the podcast. You can find audio versions of this podcast listed as Insights into Teens. You can also find video and audio versions listed under Insights into Things. And you can find us on pretty much anywhere you get a podcast: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, etc. I would also invite you to write in, give us your feedback. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. You can hit us on Twitter at twitter.com/insights_things, or you can find links to all of our social media on our website. I have in my script on our web. That's really not how that works.
No.
But our official website is www.insightsintothings.com. Are we ready?
I think we are.
Here we go. So our friends at verywellmind.com tell us about materialism, and they say materialism is the importance one places on material possessions. Pretty straightforward definition there.
Yeah.
These possessions could be anything, such as clothes, shoes, handbags, cars, electronic equipment, gadgets, or anything else of that nature. One's home also counts as a material possession, even though everyone needs a place to live. However, people who tend to be more materialistic might view their home as a way to reflect their social status rather than serving as a place to dwell for shelter. Someone with a high level of materialism is often described as, quote, materialistic. They consider material possessions to be central to their life and their identity. They focus a good deal of their energy on acquiring possessions. Someone with a low level of materialism is often described as, quote, non-materialistic or not materialistic. They don't consider acquiring possessions to be particularly important, although they vary in the extent to which they acquire material possessions in order to meet their objectives, such as social acceptance.
So, causes of teen materialism, and this comes from a very similar website with a similar title of Very Well Family, which I'm pretty sure we've also probably used in the past. Materialistic children have less supportive parents. In a study of tweens and teens, parents who were emotionally unsupportive and had more materialistic children than supportive parents. By support, we're talking about the ability for the parent to talk to, encourage, and be there for their child in good and bad times. Self-esteem is the key to understanding this finding. Supportive parenting increases adolescent self-esteem. The higher a child's self-esteem, the less likely they are to look to items to bring them happiness and a sense of worth. They get their self-worth from relationships instead. You can teach them the value of relationships by paying them with your time, energy, and interest. This will help them see their worth as a person. And even if you don't buy some things for them along the way, maintaining a relationship will lead to higher self-esteem, which can often lead to lower materialism.
Materialistic children tend to have less supportive friends. Similar to the findings of parents, the support of peers is also important for counteracting materialism. In the study, kids with supportive parents had higher self-esteem, in turn, and fewer materialistic beliefs. Supportive friends are those who are understanding and who help out in times of need and who do not get angry or upset for no reason. Supportive friends also avoid relational aggression.
It's okay, it's been a bit.
Yeah, a little rusty here. Supportive friends also avoid relational aggression and subtle bullying. Encouraging your child to find and maintain these types of friendships may help your child think less materialistically.
Along with being unsupportive, materialistic children also have, materialistic parents. Your own behavior also affects how much goods and money matter to your child. Children learn by watching, so if they see you valuing money as a source of happiness, they are likely to do the same. In addition, the researchers discovered that the more materialistic a parent was, the lower their child's self-esteem. Because low self-esteem is linked to higher materialism, it follows that materialistic parents had materialistic children.
Materialistic children also have materialistic friends. Similar to the attitudes and behaviors of peers affect materialistic beliefs, the researchers found that adolescents with materialistic friends had lower self-esteem and, in turn, higher materialism themselves. Encouraging your child to find supportive friends who do not put high value on money and things may therefore help your tween avoid being consumed by consumption. I love that line. So let me ask you, do you think we live in a materialistic house here?
In certain aspects, yeah, probably.
I would agree with you 100%. I am materialistic myself because I mean, you could just look at my Star Wars collection,
Or just take a look around the studio.
But for me, the acquisition of these things is less about my status with other people, because nobody comes over to look at my stuff, than it is a comfort. It's sort of like a comfortable blanket for me.
Yeah.
You know, my home, our home is really what I wrap myself up in when I come home from work. And I enjoy being at home and being around these things because we've made an environment here that is conducive for comfort for me. You know, like I enjoy the technology that I have, or I enjoy the video games that we have. They're all things that are for comfort for me. They have very little to do with how other people think of me. Like I don't buy things so that people think differently of me. So I think the materialism that I suffer from, and I say suffer because my collecting hobbies are very expensive. So there's some suffering that goes on there. I think the materialism that I suffer from is less destructive from a social standpoint. Financially, it's a disaster. I can tell you that, because it's like the amount of money I just saw, you know, Sideshow Collectibles just came out with 2 new Darth Vader statues that I want, and they're like $650 each. Now I'll go out and spend $650 on those and never sell them. You know, even when they go out of print and they're collectible and they double in price, I'll never sell them. So it's not even like it's an investment. It's literally just for my own edification.
Yeah, and I think like a similar allegory can be said of me with clothes. While I certainly have, of course, the collector thing like you do, I know a lot of people find materialism in clothing, and like a lot of it, like we've talked in length about, you know, judging people by their appearance based on their clothing, like what kind of status they have there. I'm somewhat materialistic when it comes to clothing. I really enjoy hoodies and
hitting the microphone over and over. Talk more with your mouth and less with your hands.
Or at least less with my left hand. Anyway, so basically I have a set of clothing that I prefer to wear and I would normally just constantly have. Hoodies is probably the biggest example of it. But half the time, it's really not about what I think other people are going to say if I'm wearing a hoodie. A lot of the times, it's just for the comfort level. I enjoy having a pocket. It's nice to be warm, but also have the ability to, if I get hot, I can just take it off.
Right.
It's a lot more about the comfort level, and it's very similar to how you feel about, you know, your collectibles.
Yeah, coming from a family that had very little as far as disposable income goes, and, you know, we lived paycheck to paycheck. We had a single family income. We've talked about it in the past. I didn't have anything. So what little bit you had, you kind of held on to. And I grew up with I was the youngest of 4 brothers. So everything I got was either shared or it was handed down from someone else. So it was very rare for me to get anything of my own. And I make a joke now because, like, I was into computers when I was a kid, and I never had, when I first got my computer, I didn't have a monitor. I couldn't afford a monitor. So I had to hook it up through this adapter called an RF modulator to a TV. And it wasn't the right hookup, but it was the only thing I could do to get it to work, and it looked terrible. You had lines through it. You had wavy lines. The colors weren't right. So you would sit there in front of the TV and use the computer for a period of time and get a headache from it. And I make a joke now because I've got, 6 monitors in here. I've got 6 monitors on my one computer downstairs and a total of maybe 8 monitors, 10 monitors on my desk. So I'm overcompensating for some of the things I had to endure as a kid.
Yeah.
So I think part of my materialism stemmed from literally having nothing as a kid, and fortunately I can afford these things now, so I overindulge in them sometimes, I think. Do you think you're materialistic other than the clothes?
Probably. I do find I am a collector of sorts, similar to how both you and Mommy are. and that I like to kind of decorate my room with it. While I don't have one specific hobby that I decorate my entire room with, I find other hobbies, and I like the collectibles, and again, it is the comfort level. I am probably a lot more picky when spending my money because
it's your money.
Yeah.
You're a lot less picky when it's our money.
I'll be honest there. Yes, it's true.
So do you think materialism can have a positive side to it?
I mean, yeah, there's a lot about a lot of things we talk about on this podcast. There's good and bad to come with it, and you can't go from. It's best to stay in the middle of the scale. If you tip too far down the one side, something bad's gonna happen. If you're too far up on the other side, something bad's gonna happen. And really, you gotta find that perfect balance.
So materialism with balance is a good thing.
Yeah, it can be.
Okay, I'll buy that. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about why materialism is bad. We'll be right back. For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com.
Welcome back to Insights into Teens. Today we're talking about teens and materialism. Honestly, kind of seems like every time we have a topic, it's just teens and.
Teens and something. Well, insights into teens. What do you expect?
Well, fair. So now we're going to talk about why materialism is bad, and this comes to us from. Really should have asked what this was. Help.
Vishal Vizhale. I don't know. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, put it in the show notes. So sorry I can't pronounce it. So, they say materialism changes you in unexpected ways. It badly affects your emotional and mental well-being without you knowing it. It harms your way of looking at life. Materialism brings several pains along with it, so here are some simple clues to help you understand how worse it can be. First up is that you define your value in terms of the objects you own. In the course, you lose your authenticity, self-belief, and think your worth is only equal to the price tag of your t-shirt. You get stuck in a never-ending comparison. The possibility that your lawn is less green keeps you relentless and insecure. You stop sleeping well at night, which is a bit extreme, but I guess can be fair. Your self-esteem shatters when you don't meet your own unrealistic expectations. Fair. Even if you're blessed with abundance. Even if you're blessed...
You could be blessed with ambiance, too. I don't know.
Even if you're blessed with abundance, you become blind to your own goodness. You dilute yourself...
Delude. You don't dilute it.
I'm sorry.
You're not a liquid.
It looks so similar. It's not... No. You delude yourself by buying more stuff and thinking you're closer to happiness than before, even when you're not. You remain unhappy for insensible reasons.
That's how bad I can murder this. You get fooled by advertisements and hypocrisy around you. You stop using your senses and remove your wallet without a second thought. You become desperately poor, not because you don't have enough, but because you develop a hunger that can't be satisfied. You keep demanding more, getting stuffed with selfishness, and show no trace of contentment. so you suffer more due to such behavior. You feel grateful for nothing. You stop appreciating what you already have because it's not as good as what you want. Therefore, you're busy chasing the next shiny thing. You crave external appreciation and wait to be noticed by others. You put your efforts towards impressing others, even when it doesn't serve a purpose.
You keep feeling incomplete, unsuccessful, and dissatisfied, and you carry the same feelings with you till the end. You disturb your well-being through your attachment to your bank account. You become too dependent on your possessions as you try to define yourself through them, which arouses mental and emotional instability. You fall prey to negative feelings such as greed, jealousy, and hatred, as you often see others as a part of your race and you don't want them to win. You know, the whole, it's not a competition unless I'm winning thing.
You're saying I'm materialistic because of that? That just means I'm competitive.
I don't know, it just sounds way too similar to that. You compromise your values and principles for gains. Soon, the gap between right and wrong starts to fade for you. You lose your true identity. Then you try to become what others want you to become, not what you hope to become.
You spend your resources on temporary pleasures and lose the opportunity of making a change in your own and others' lives. So you neglect the bigger picture. You become blind to the qualities of people and judge them based on their earnings and financial status. This only makes you look pompous and arrogant. You limit your perception to the monetary side of life, after which you stop seeing all other ways to happiness and success. You see no other way to prove yourself or to estimate your success, and therefore cling to the path you're already on. You unknowingly manipulate your own emotions and hence gather regrets and pains as time passes. You trap yourself within the life you choose and only find nothingness, despair, and meaninglessness when you look back. It can be miserable when you have almost no memories. So that sounds pretty bleak there. I mean, that's some dark stuff.
Yeah, way more dark than I remember it being when I typed it up.
Yeah. Do you feel any of that based on the materialistic tendencies that we've already discussed that you and I both have?
Well, let's go down the list real quick. So you define your value in terms of the objects you own. We kind of both specified we don't really do that, and it's really just for the comfort level.
Right.
So I don't think either of us are to that extent of it. You get stuck in a never-ending comparison. I mean, I never really compare myself and what I have to others, other than like, oh my god, they have a cool SpongeBob thing or something.
Right.
Like, what about you?
I used to as a kid, because having nothing and having a friend whose parents bought him everything, it tends to wear on you as a kid. As an adult, not so much anymore. You know, and I'm the type of person that if I want something, I go buy it. Then I figure out how to pay for it. So, as an adult, you can make that mistake.
Okay. Then we have your self-esteem shatters when you don't meet your own unrealistic expectations. This has nothing to do with my materialism. It just happens that I have that. That's not exactly... I don't think that's a fault of my materialism.
Yeah.
It's just I have my own unrealistic expectations that if I don't meet them, I crush myself over it.
I'll buy that.
Then we have you delude yourself by buying more stuff and thinking you're closer to happiness than before, even when you're not.
Yeah, see, I never really gain happiness from the things that I buy. Usually the things that I buy for comfort or I buy for utility.
Yeah. And yeah, half the time I'm like already stressed when I buy stuff because it's like, oh my god, am I going to ever use this? Am I just going to completely forget about it? Is it worth it?
Yeah, you tend to be much more discriminating in the things that you buy.
Yeah.
So I don't think either of us really fall into most of these categories. Is there any categories that you feel you fall into?
Again, really just the category, again, being technically more miserly with my money, I'm not as materialistic. I certainly hold value. Like, here's the thing. So, I definitely know I'm materialistic, but not in the ways that most people would assume being materialistic is. I'm not the type of kid that would go up and, like, ask you to buy me something. If anything, I have my own money and I go buy it, and I ask you if I can buy something.
Right.
It's kind of a reverse of what, like, the normal psychology is.
That's true.
And I also have kind of realized that the way that I connect with people or things that I hold dear are physical possessions from people. So I know I'm materialistic in the sense that it's quote unquote my love language, even though we haven't talked about that yet. So
Dude, spoilers.
I don't even know when we're going to get to that.
That's a future podcast. We'll get to it.
So yeah, I know it's kind of similar. I know, like, I have that kind of form where it's like I definitely value, like, I get my own, I can buy my own stuff, but when other people get, like, stuff for me or give me small little trinkets, I value them a lot more because, like, I have an entire thing on my desk that's dedicated to little trinkets all my friends have given me. Like,
Let me ask you this. Do you feel grateful for the things that you have right now?
Definitely. Yes.
And do you crave external appreciation to be noticed by and wait to be noticed by others?
Honestly,